Okay, Vach, I'll come to you from Yerushalayim Kodesh. It's night of Slichus, Erev Rosh Hashanah. She'll be zeicha to a good gebenched yar. Be zeicha that Slichus, we should say, with the proper kavanah, and accomplish the required, what we so desire. Says the Mishnah, up to the Mishnah on Ayin Beis, Amid Beis. A Mekadesh Isha, a person is Mekadesh Isha, he gives not Nesu and Erisin. Al-Menas on the condition Shein Alen Nedarim. That she doesn't have Nedarim. We saw a previous Gemara, a woman with Nedarim, Leilenu, she could be an Adronis and children would die as a result if she doesn't keep the Nedarim. So he's Mekadesha on the condition she doesn't have Nedarim. Benimsu Alen Nedarim, and you find there's Nedarim. Enim Kudeshes. She's not Mekudeshes and you do not require a get. It's Kedushay Tois. This is called Kedushay Tois. Now, this question is, this next case is going back on the first case. So therefore, he's Mekadesh on Tanai, and then Konsa Stam, he does Nesuim Stam without repeating the Tanai, or it's a separate new case. We're going to see it's a Machloikis in the Gemara. Konsa Stam, where he was ahead and does Nesuim, the second stage Stam, the Nimsala Nedarim, Heitze with a get, Shloi B'Ksuba without a Ksuba. Okay, that's the first case. Second case, similar. Just go ahead and interject Mumin rather than Nedarim. Amanash Ein Ba Mumin. If a man goes ahead and marries a woman, he gives her Erisin, Amanash, she doesn't have Mumin. She doesn't have some type of blemish. Benim Sabah Mumin, and you find that she does, right? Einem Kudeshes, it's Kedushay Tois. Konsa Stam, Benim Sabah Mumin, Teitze Shleb Ksuba, the same halacha as the previous case by Nedarim. And what the women are under discussion, Kala Mumin, Poislim, because Kanim, Poislim, Menashim. Any woman who would render a kohen puzzle to do the avodah, as stated in Masechta B'chayris, I guess we'll get into it, is one that would passel a woman. It says Gemara V'tanami got kedushin. We have the exact same Mishnah Masechta Kedushin ki hay gavna. So the question is, why was it necessary for Rabbi to repeat it? So the Gemara answers, Hacha ksubis itzrichlei. Over here in Masechta Ksubis, we need the din of that she goes out with no ksuba or right. So Tana Kedushin at the Ksuba. We learned the case of Kedushin at the Ksuba. Not that we need the case of Kedushin, we need the case of Ksuba. Hasam Masech the Kedushin, it's Richlei, Tana Ksuba, right? So it's Richlei, Tana Ksubis at the Kedushin. We learned Ksubis Agav Kedushin. I'm Rabbi Yechim Mishum Menu Tzaddik. The Elin Nedarim Amru, these are what Nedarim are we speaking about on the discussion that a man would go ahead and say, my wife will not be my wife, because it's a Kedushay Tois, which Nedarim, in other words, it's all Nedarim, any specific Nedarim, we'll see in a second. Shlei Teichel Basa, I should eat wine, meat. Shlei Tishti Yayin, not drink wine. Shlei Tiskashe, big day Savoinim, not wear nice clothing. Tanya Nami Hachi, a brisa that substantiates the Amoyer Rabbi Yochanan's words. The Elu Nedarim, the what in Nedarim we're speaking about, that would be a cause for Mekach Tois, the Varim Sheyesh Behem Inu Nefesh, things that have Inu Nefesh, they're painful. For example, Shlei Teichel Baso, Shlei Tishti Yayin, Shlei Tiskashe Big Deit Tzvainim. Hoi Bareb, Papa asked, hey, this case of Elu Nedarim, what's going on? Because after all, there were two cases in the Mishnah. The first case of Mishnah of what? Of where he made it Tanai, or the second case of Konsistam. Ilema Resha, the case of we Mekadesh on it tonight, that there's no mashma, no Nedarim, period. Even the Kakapit, since he's makban on any Nedarim, I feel Komilinami, even any Nedarim, not just the ones of Inu Nefesh, not just the one of meat and wine and clothing, or anything. Ella must be on the Sefer, must be on the Sefer Konsa Stam. If you go ahead and you Stam, and you find out she has Nedarim of Inu Nefesh, as we just mentioned, then Teitze below Ksuba. Ashiyam no, La'olam Aresha, La'olam it's going in the Resha. It's going in the Resha, L'chayra, any neder, because he said he's machnas on the condition, he's mekadesh on the condition that there's no nedarim. Umidi the kapid by inshi havi kapeda. Things that are people are machnar are kapeda. Midi the loy kapda by inshi loy havi kapeda. So things that a person machnar on, they're machnar on. Things they're not machnar on. So in other words, it's not this automatically when it says Nedarim, all Nedarim, it doesn't mean Nadronis. It means Nedarim that people are makbar on, things that are no sweat, no big deal, like a water off a duck's back, that doesn't make a difference. So it can be going in the ratio also, and these types of Nedarim, meaning Nefesh, of Basar, of Yayin, of clothing, Skashe, that's the type of neder the person's makbar on. But Stam is saying that even though you made it tonight, go ahead without Nedarim, it would not be a problem, it would not be an ekach. Itmar. Kid shal tenai, the consistent. Okay, so you gave Erisin with a condition that there's no Nadar. Good. The Kansa, but came to the Nisuin, you didn't mention anything about the Tanai. And you did in the second stage of marriage, stop. Rav Omar, Sricha Himenu get. Says Rav, we won't say it's a Kedushay Tois. We won't say that the Nisuin was on the Tanai of what? Of the Tanai that we just mentioned by the Erisin. We'll say that what? He was Mekadosh Stam, and you'll need a get. Ushmul Omar, Ain't Tzrichi Menu get, you do not need a get, because we'll say the Nisuin took place on the Tanai what of the Erisin, which was what? Which Soimich on what that there wasn't an Edda. So if you found the Dorib, you would not need a get. Amar Abaya. Abaya goes ahead and says the reason of Rav. Loi Tema Taima de Rav. Don't say the reason for Rav is Kivin Shekonsa Stam Achuli Achle Latanoi. In other words, don't say the following. Don't say, really, the Tanai was always there. And really, when he had the Nisuin, the reason you need a get is because since he didn't mention anything by Nisuin, he's Michael the Tanai. Don't say that. Don't say that. Ella, what's the reason? Ella, time with the Rab Lefishain Odom Oisa Bilas Bilasnus. A person will not make his bila a bilasinus. Now that's it. In other words, Ken Zayin that he still had that Tanai. But that was speaking by Erison. Now he's going to be Bailha. If he's Bailha, he has Bia, he's not going to have Bilas Nus, the Mamela you would need again. That's the slur of Rav. Mashmalet Shmuel, that when there is a Tanai, you'll say a person is Bail Bilas Nus, only when there's a Tanai, when you have these conditions. At the time of the Ralfish, in the Maisa Bila Bilas Nus. Spread the Gemara, why is it necessary to go ahead and say this? You already said this one time before. Here's the case we had in Masechta Yavamis. A man is living with a girl that she was a katana. Her father had died. Her mother or brother married off Kedusha de Rabbanan. We all know when she gets of age, she can do miyan. She can do miyan, right? And then she doesn't let it get. What happens over here? She grows up. The husband's still living with her. She does miyan, and then she goes ahead and lives with another guy. The question is, do we say since she godla, the person knows at that period in time, she ain't kedusha katana klum, that is mekadosh her at this time, and therefore the miyan that she doesn't help for the next marriage, and the next marriage is nothing, you don't need to get? Or do we say no? Do we say a person's bail without that in mind, and therefore you have to go ahead and get a get from the second husband? Rav holds you do not have to get from the second husband because the bia that he has, that when she's a gedola, she has in mind for new bia. And Shmuel says, no, he doesn't have that in mind. It's just boil. And therefore you need it from the second get from the second husband, which is the exact same machlokes we're having over here. Says the Gemara inside. But says the Gemara, big deal, and she got older. And the key is she lived with her husband then. And then Umiyana, the Benisa is married her second time. Rava could get Mishani. She doesn't need to get from the second husband. Shmuel it's why? Because he realized that he's boil when she got older. He's in Kedusha Clan of He's not boil bilisnos, right? And therefore what? He's boil up for the right reason. And Shmuel says, Amatzri could get Mishani. So what do you have to say? Machloikas here in Masechta Kesuvos with Tanai, and there in Masechta Yavamis by Mia. So it's Tzricha. In the case of Yavamis, he come around Mishum Deleka Tanoi. There's no Tanai over there. It's far to say that everyone knows the Kedusha Katan is nothing, therefore the B is a good B, and therefore the second husband is nothing. Aval Bahaba, where there's a Tanai, Dika Tanai, Ema Moidle, the Shmuel, the Chayr is a Tanai, and the B is Mashma, the B, and the Smi of Nesun is Mashma on the Erison, the Tanai of Erison. So maybe he's been made to the Shmuel that you do not need to get. The case of by Tanai, because again, you have the Nesuin following the Erison of a Tanai, and therefore the Svara is the Tanai of what of Nedarim is Schala on the Nesuin was that as well, and therefore what? The Bia is not a Bia. It's Kedushay Tois. But the case of Yavamis, Ema Moidele Rav, so Tzricha tell me even there, a person will be boil, Shalai al Manas of the Katana, and therefore you need to get from the second husband. Okay, now we're going to ask on Shmuel. Again, why does Shmuel say that you do not need to get because the bia is the bilas nus? Good. Now, I'm going to Mishnah say, and now the half a meaning of the Mishnah, there's two cases. Remember, Mekadesh on a Tanai, there's no Nadarim, the Konsa Stam. So the half a meaning of Gemara is it's one case, one flowing into the other. you're Makadish, but that what with the Arisin, that is no Tanai, and then in the Suin, you didn't say anything, but the Havamina is it's one case. Why did this case say you need a get? Kasha and Shmuel says the Gemara. Konsistam v'nimsu lehanidarim teitzish lebik suba. Ksuba hudlei boy. You don't need it. Ksuba hakita boy. You need a get. My love kitcha al tanai. That you made a kanai that she's not a nadronis. You konsistam, and then you had in the suin based upon that tanai. And you see that you need a get, because ain't no the boy will be less nus, says the Gemara here to the Shmuel, the Charetz and Abshlag and Shmuel. What's Shmuel's answer? It's two separate cases. Okay, Shmuel's answer is two separate cases. It's not an easy Gemara. Says the Gemara like Kitcha Stam. It's one case. Kitcha Stam, that's one case. You Makadish Stam, Vikonsa Stam, right? There, if you Kiddush Stam, Vikonsa Stam, and then you find out she's a Nadronis, then Teitze Blik Subas. Aval kitcha al tenai, if you makadish on a tenai, and the stam, hachanami the loy boy gita, you wouldn't need a get. Okay, that's the Gemara makes the diak. So the Mishnah is speaking two separate cases: a case of kitcha and tenai, and a case of konsa stam. Read the Gemara the following: you're telling me that konsa stam says the Gemara hachanam. Adatoni says the Gemara, but aval kitcha al tenai bekonsa stam, like then hachanami loy boy gita. So it says the Gemara, why do you tell me? I could tell me a bigger chiddush. Adatani hamakadesh isha al menas she'ena le nedarim v'nimsa le nedarim ena mekudeshes. Listening, a better case. Konsa stam, according to Shmuel, if you konsa stam v'nimsa le nedarim ena mekudeshes. The kol shekain ha konsa stam you find is ena mekudeshes, right? So certainly a case where you first mentioned that you were Makadosh of Tanai and Makadosh. So why you learn the less of a chiddush, learn a bigger chiddush. It says not Mahachinam Kama. That's what it means. Hamakadosh is the Isha. Someone's Makadosh and Isha. Amanashin log nedarim and v'konsa stam v'nim solen nedarim and Makadoshes. What about Kitchu stam v'konsa stam? Teitze shloi b'ksuba. Ksuba hudloi boy hagita boy. But the Gemara, why should not ksuba the boy? Why don't you need a ksuba? Right, the army, we say, that a guy doesn't want a woman who's not joinus. Once we mechalik, if you know ksuba, because he doesn't want nisha that joinus, and she's not getting ksuba, he doesn't want the woman, period. So therefore, why is there good kedushin? So why do you need to get? So Rabbi, tzricha get medavreim, you need to get medavreim. B'chinam Rav Chisda, tzricha get medavreim, you need sol de Rabbana. Rabbi says, here's the following. This is the reason, the difference between why a get you need and why money not. Tana sluki misafkale. The Tana was misupik, whether stam a person, right, is al stam adam in efshi vishna jonas olav. It's misupik whether a person is happy with a nadronis, not happy with a nadronis. Gabim Moina will say hamaitzi mechaber l'raya. It's not like any other suffix. So she wants a ksuba, she'd have to bring a raya. Gabi Isura regarding the Isra of an Ashes Ish, l'chumra you would need to get. Okay, so Abaya's explanation of Machlokes Rav and Shmuel was predicated on whether Adam is boil bilas nus or not. Says Rav not, and therefore you need to get even your konsa stam. According to Shmuel, no, a person would be boil bilas nus, and if you go ahead and you're Makadish with Tanai, and then konsa stam, and then you go ahead and have Nisuin based upon that premise, you would not need a get at all in a Mekudeshes. That's the way Abai explained the Mishnah. Rabbi disagrees. Rabbi disagrees totally. Rabbi's svara is that it would be boil bilas nus, and the shaila is: do we say that a person's boil on the first tanai or not? As we'll see. Rabbi says so. That's Rabbi's explanation of machlokes between Rab and Shmuel. I'm a Rab. Machlokes in Rab and Shmuel that Rab says you need to get and Shmuel says you don't need to get is betois shtei nashim, where you made a mistake with two nashim. Get. Now, what's the case of shtei nashim? You marry a girl Rachel, and you say, Rachel, I'm going ahead and giving you kedushin on the almanas that you have in the dronis. He then marries Leah Stam and doesn't mention anything. Do we say, since it's Megala by Rachel, who had in Leah or not? Loit Rav, no. Loit Rav, we say, whatever he said to Rachel, he said to Rachel. Leah may be more dear to him, and therefore what? He's not makbid on daughter. Hashem King Shmuel, we say the Gilui by Rachel would be Megala on Leah, and the Mela what you would need to get. Loit Rav, you would need to get from if you get divorced from Leah. Why? Because Because again, maybe Leah, there's nothing to do with Nidarim. Hashenkin, according to Rachel, but according to Leah, no, Leah's full-fledged wife. And says the Gemara, Amalei Abaya, says Abaya. But my sneezing the toys isha achasi. Our Mishnah, but Dibri Akol, I finish off, I'm sorry. I'll be isha achas Dibri Akol in Tzrichim men get. By one woman, if you go ahead and say the following, you'd say that I'm Mekadesh you on condition that what? That you have no Nidarim. That's Mekadesh. When he goes ahead and marries her, Stam, right? Everyone would agree. Even Rav would agree that you don't need to get. I know that doesn't be listeners. Again, Rav argues on Abaya. But again, once there's a Tanai and the Tanai is not fulfilled, here's the key to Rabbah. If there's a Tanai and one woman, everyone agrees you do not need to get Kedushay Tois. Why? Because the B was done based upon the first Tanai, and the Tanai wasn't fulfilled because she turned out to be Madronis. So that's by one woman. The Machloikis, Rabbi Shmuel, is by two women. Do we say the second woman is, even though he said Stam, is what? Dependent upon the Gili of the first woman? Like that's what Shmuel says. And Shmuel says, no, the fact that he married the second woman has nothing to do with the first woman. That's the way Rabbi is explaining it. Now, Abai is going to have a problem. We asked on Shmuel from the whole Gemara was based upon that we're speaking about one woman, right? We said, what was the upshlag? If it's speaking about one case where Mekadesh al Tanai, the Stam by one woman, right? Then we said that what you need to get kasha on Shmuel, and Shmuel said it's speaking about two separate cases, but the whole kasha was from woman. So how can Rabbi say that that by one woman everyone agrees? You see from the Gemara, it's not true. That's the bias kasha on Rabbi. Amalei Abaya says Abaya to Rabbi. But Masnisan on Mishnah the toys Ashes Ish Achasi. It's by a woman by one Ashes Ish. You come a Slina to Yufdam Mine, and we ask the kasha. So you see that by one woman, not everyone agrees. Ella, let's go ahead and do a little tweaking to the two women. If you want to learn Rabbi's din about two women, here's what we have to learn. Amar Rabba, machloikis betois isha achas ke'ein shtei nashim, where you had a tois in one woman like two women. Pirish, you married Rachel, and then you with a Tanai, and then you divorced Rachel, and then you remarried her without a Tanai. So there, the machloikas between Rav and Shmuel is the second marriage. Do we say that the first marriage was nisgala his das for the second marriage? Rav says yes, and therefore you need to get. And Shmuel says no, you don't need to get. That's the machloikas Rav and Shmuel. By one woman came two women, meaning he married her twice. Divorced him the first time, but that was on the condition that he mentioned the Darim, and the second one he didn't. Good. So therefore, do we say the first one's a Gili or not? So that's the machlokas. A regular case of what? Without any one woman that you marry, and then you on a Tanai, and then you that's the Erisin, and then you go ahead and you do the Suin, and you find out that she wasn't Adronis, everyone hold you not need to get. So what's Pshat na Mishnah? Pshat na Mishnah would be, it's speaking about that case. That's the case where it says konsa stam that you need to get would be a case of Gerishin, where you went ahead and you married her, you divorced her, and then you konsa stam. Then do we say Gilui? And then we say in Mikadeshes, because Rav would say that the first Gilui was a Gilui. Divya call ain't get, but that's by Bedasa. Now we're listening on this din of Rabbah. Says Rabbah that when you get married, right? Everyone says you get married, right? That you don't take it, you get taken to the Tanai that you take into account. So what does Rabbah say? It says Rabbah Divya call when you get married with a condition, and you find out the Nesuin Stam, the condition wasn't fulfilled, Divrei Akol, Rav would be Moida, Ein Tzrichim and a get. So we're going to question that every time you say that a person's boil, al das the Tanoi's boil. We're going to ask on that. That's the key to that one line. That's the key. Everyone is Moida, even Rav is Moida. When you boil on the Nesuin of the first Erisin of the Tanai, and Tanai is not fulfilled, then you do not need a get. Okay. Esvei Abaya. Kitcha betois, mashma, one case, kitcha betois in the Havamim is Nedarim. Second case, upachas meshava pruta, if you mekadesh for less than a shava pruta. The chain cotton shekidesh, a third case, a cotton that's mekadesh. Afa pisha shalach savlu noisay lachem. On all three cases, Even if you send gifts when the cotton when they get older, when lachsim shavaputa or kitchebetois, and this with as far to say the McDonald's, the delicacies he's sending now is a new kiddushin. Mikaena mikudeshes. Why? Shemachmas kiddushin rishonim shalach. Right? That you sent them after the kiddushin rishonim. The imbalu, and if you boil, kanu. So what do you see? Like this Tanakama, that you kaina. And you don't say that that the beer was al das, the original Tanai. If you kind of, you would need a get. That's a kasha on Rabbi's statement. Continuing the Baisa, Rabbi Shmuel, Shimon Yehuda Mishum Rabbi Shmuel Leimer, and Balu Loi Kaina. I vahacha the toyas isha achas he yitaya when in isha achas upligi, and they argue. You Rabbi said Rabbi said across the board they all agree by isha achas that if you don't fulfill the Tanai, you don't need to get. Here we see a machlokes it's like the Tanakama. You do you kind of. The Tanai wasn't fulfilled. Says Gemara, my love toys nedarim. The first case is toys nedarim, so l'chayr that's a kasha. So like toys b'pachas mishava pruta. It's not speaking about toys nedarim because toys nedarim echanami you would not need to get. It's speaking toys b'pachas mishava pruta. For the Gemara, pachas mishava pruta behedu katani la. You learn two cases, toys and pachas mishava pruta. Mashma it's two separate cases. Mashma the first case is nedarim and back hadru kash l'dochtei. Says well no. Kitche betois upachas mishava pruta perusha come farish. Kitche betois. What's the case of kedusha betois? Ketzad kigon shekitcha bepachas mishava pruta. That's the case. But in achinami kedusha nedarim you would not need to get because on that tonight not. And here's the machlokes. But my comment the Tanakama says kaina and Rushim says not. Masav adam yadei shen kedushin toisim bepachas mishava pruta the Tanakama, and therefore what the gomer or boil shen kedushin the bia and therefore kaina. Masav Reb Shimon says no. Ein adam yadei shen kedushin toisim bepachas mishava and that person that's a lamdin and b'chika boil when he's boil adaiti the kedusha rishonim boil on the das of the pachas mishava pruta therefore you're not kaina. But in achinami if it was a tanai of the darim and you didn't fulfill the tanai, everyone would be say that you do not need to get. Esvei, harini ba'alayich al menash sheyirtza abba. I'm boiled you in the kanas that your father is masking to the kedushin. Afal pishlei whatza av mikudeshes. Since the kasha is coming from the Tanakama, you see that tonight wasn't fulfilled. But it's good kedushin. Reb Shimon Yehuda Aimer. Reb Shimon Yehuda says mishum Reb Shimon. Whatza av mikudeshes. So the father is happy with the union. Then mikudeshes loy whatza av and mikudeshes. It's one isha dami upligi, and you have machlokes. Again, the Tanakama is the shver kaida on Rabba. Hasan b'hakam you know. Masav al menashe yirtza av. When it says the father is maskim, you don't need a positive. You just don't need a negative. Al menashe yishtai. And he was quiet. Well, Masava and Reb Shimon says no. Al menashe yoma abahein. V'halayama abahein. He never said it, but in Chinami. As the Tanai wasn't, it's not. It's speaking about a different. It's speaking about whether the Tanai was again. This is the machlokes gufa is exactly what the fulfillment was. In other words, according to the Tanakama, the Tanai was fulfilled. Just being quiet. According to Reb Shimon, it wasn't fulfilled. But in Achinami by Isha Achas, but the Tanai wasn't fulfilled, everyone will be moida that ain't mekudeshes, and you don't need to get. Esevei. Now here's a case in Yavanis where a girl, she goes ahead and she marries man, gets divorced, and then the man dies, whether she do yibum or not. We had this in Yavanis or not. It's gezeira a man marries her off midaraisa, and then the husband dies or she gets divorced. Now she's a free agent, and over there, if she marries. Then what she doesn't. If she marries, she's me, and she doesn't fall to Yibam. Says so. Whether you guys or not. Yesterday, the Katana Shesia Avia, the Katana married her off in this Garsha, and she got divorced. Right, you moida over there that she doesn't fall to Yibam. The he is Simon Bechayav, the Rezira that there's no Yibam because there's no real. The Kedushin is only Kedusha Katana, and therefore she doesn't fall to Yibam. Again, she's a Katana. Gerushin Gemurin, so full-fledged Gerushin, because after all, the father's Kedushin was a Kedushin, the Gerushin was a good Gerushin. But when she remarried her husband, she's a Katana. It's not the father marrying her off this time, it's her marrying her off the time, she's Katana, and Kedushin Katana Klum, and therefore, when the husband dies, there's no Yibam. When do we say this then? When he married, when she was divorced as a katana, which is a full-fledged gerushin. Why? Because the father's kedushin was deraisa, and chesira kishikatana, and that's not a good kedushin. So therefore, when the husband died, therefore there's no yibum. Aval girsha kishikatana. If you went and married her when she was a katana, and you divorced her when she's a katana, and you took her back when she's a gedola, but the kedushin is good kedushin. You took her back when she's a katana, and here's the case we need. The godla etzloi, and she grew up by him. Umeis. Now l'chayra, she grew up by him, and he was boil her at that time. Umeis, and then dies. Why? Because she falls to yibum. Now, mishum Rebbe Lezer, even in that case, you can do chalitza. Now, the case again, what's the case we need? Godla etzloi, where she grew up. The katos isha achas dami. This is similar to what but isha achas. Let's see Rashi. When the case where she came back when she was a katana to the same husband, the godla etzloi, and now again he's boiled her when she's a gedola, and now he dies. The tois isha achas he tois kedusha katana, right? The tois was in kedusha katana upligi the kamer rabbanon misyabemes alma ki boil mishagodla l'shem kedushin boil the kasal kedaita who hadin the tois nedarim. So it's the commonality over here is that by isha achas that it's not possible that you would need a get. Everyone be maida. It's not true. You see over here loita chachamim misyabemes. Why? Because it is a good kedushin. It's isha achas, and we're comparing the bia of a katana going to gedolahud at that time. We're comparing it to what to the tois of nedarim. Upligi, and for the Gemara Hasanami b'hakamifki, Masav Adam Yadeya Shi Kedusha Katana Klum, the Gama Boil, L'Shem Kedushin, the Chachamim hold that they know Kedusha Katana is nothing, and when he took her back, and obviously when she got older, she was Kedushin, it was good Kedushin, and therefore, if the husband dies, she falls to Ibum. Masav Rabbi Eliezer holds, Ein Adam Yadeya Shi Kedusha Katana Klum. So we have a svara to machalik, but in achinami, the kedusha isha achas, where you have a tanai and tanai is not fulfilled, everyone hold ein mekudeshes, and you not need to get a good tafach, a good yar, and enjoy your slichas.